pleasure to meet you, man.
It's a pleasure too. Warren, congratulations for The Man in the White Van. It is one spectacular thriller. I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen next.
Oh, that's so great. It's so great to hear. And when you're crafting a suspense thriller and something like this, what really excited me about the project was being able to play with a lot of the suspense and, really let it sort of sizzle and simmer and continue to build. And then hopefully, build into what an audience will feel as a pretty thrilling climax at the end.
So tell us what was the original story or the original idea? Where did it came from for you?
Sure. So I was actually having a dinner with a producing and financier friend of mine, and was telling him about a true crime thriller project that I was developing in Arizona. And he just said to me, "Hey, if you like true crime and such, you really ought to hear the story of what happened to my wife in Brooksville, Florida, when she was growing up as a kid." So we got together, we had coffee, and that led to about three or four more coffee meetings. And she proceeded to share with me these really unsettling stories of her interactions with a white van. And that was something that just opened up a world of interest for me. I mean, one, I love the fact that her story, I love that when most serial killer stories are framed by an investigative reporter tracking down all the mysteries of what's happening, or a detective who's hunting down their killer, or flipping the script, it's about the actual serial killer themselves and how they developed their mo, and the tough childhood they were raised in that somehow justifies their actions when they're older. And what I really loved about this was the unique perspective of this 15-year-old girl who had no clue what was really happening and the danger that was lurking around her back in 1974, Brooksville, Florida, in a small town. And as I did a little bit more research, I really discovered that this was in all actuality one of the original origin stories for why it is we all sort of have this underlying fear of a white van. And I think altogether it just really fascinated me, and I thought, holy cow, this is something that I've got to find a way to develop and make happen, because it's too good of a story, and it's too unknown of a story not to be told.
And for such a long time, I thought it was like an urban legend just to scare children.
Right? True. I mean, I think 50 years later, after all of this, it sort of becomes, I mean, it sort of becomes a trope, right? Like, oh, it's the white van or whatever. But in reality, there's some very scary origins of why that's the case. And there, I mean, you still hear of whether or not it's like the go-to capture vehicle for kidnappers or serial killers. But I mean, even I think last year there was a video that went viral of a guy trying, leaving a white van and trying to grab a 12-year-old girl who I think fought back and actually escaped him, and he ran back to the van and continued on his journey. But um, the other, I think the toolbox killer was another one in the 70s that also operated out of the work van that was white. So there's a lot of these different stories that sort of permeate out of the 70s, where these really evil men could operate, unfortunately, without a lot of tracking happening around them.
That's true. That's true. Now, of course, the fascinating part about your story, it is almost like a cry wolf story. Could you talk about, that aspect and casting, perfectly with Madison into that role?
Oh, phew, I have so much love for Madison. She is so dear to me. I'm so honored that she, took on the role and brought to it what she did. There is an element of a theme of disbelief and subsequently paranoia, um, you know, that kind of moves along in the film. And um, I think that that's sort of I think it's sort of fun to play with because obviously that's a common theme in horror and thriller films. But in this particular case, it was actually the real sort of time period that um, sort of allowed that sensibility to really, kind of play out. Because for the parents, they were so unsuspecting and skeptical of their daughter because they lived in such a safe world where they grew up and it was just everybody knew everybody and the families knew their families. So the idea of something evil lurking out there wasn't even a thought. It wasn't in their consciousness that they could even process. They grew up in a town where the worst thing that happened was the sheriff having to take the town drunk home on a Friday night. That was the criminal activity in Brooksville, before they actually discovered something much more menacing happening, when they started uncovering bodies in 1981.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I want to say the most brilliant thing you did in this film is the
Okay,
man.
first off, I can't believe you're even using the word brilliant because you just can't. Like there's so many filmmakers out there that deserve that sort of praise. So I'm just gonna stop you there. But keep going, keep going. I'm
Oh,
here to anyway.
well, let me commend you. Is the man himself in the film? You use shadows. You didn't want to show his face. I mean, I how difficult was it not to do any type of reveal? I mean, and who played it? It could have been you playing it for all I know.
It's funny. We actually, at one point in time, I did think, well, it might be my hands at some point in time in the film. There's probably pieces of the man that actually was me, but um, no, I'm glad you picked up on that because one of the things, even though like now in the press, I'm sure there are people that are going to pick up on, and it'll be out there now of who the man, the white van actually is, and the serial killer and stuff. But in the film itself, we really wanted the emphasis to be on the victims and on Annie's story, and to have it really rooted in Annie's story, where she really didn't get a clean shot of who the man was, to the point that in real life she was not really able to identify or come up with who this man was to assist police in any which way, shape, or form. And they were kind of at a standstill. Um, but yeah, we didn't want to share his face. We didn't want to give him that power. Um, and I think there's always something fun about not you know the unknown, I think. And we kind of wanted to pull a little bit of, I think one of our inspirations for the film, or one of my inspirations for the film and the editor was certainly Jaws, and the way in sharks and great white shark in general, and how it they kind of work in the depths, and you never really see them, and you kind of see pieces of them here and there until they're ready to pounce, and that's sort of how we wanted to view the white van in this.
Most excellent. Well, Warren, let me address one last thing, and I'm not going to go ahead and call it brilliant or anything like that.
Okay, sure.
Tell us about that tactic of a backwards timeline of victims. I mean, that was that really drew the audiences in.
Well, we wanted, so that was when we were telling the story, we knew we had this chronological story with Annie and her interactions, kind of in the way in which they occurred over time, and ultimately what it culminated into. And that could have just been its own story all to itself, right? But then my writing partner Sharon and I were kind of thinking of like, well, what else could we do with this to help like add another level of suspense, add something. Conceptually, I really wanted to work on a feeling of a countdown to this night in which she gets abducted, and we just sort of came up with the idea of what if we told the victim's story chronologically backward in descending order, so that we had these two timelines sort of working in opposite directions that would just converge on Halloween night 1974, where Annie would become, the inevitable victim of, the man, the white van.
Well, you know what? It is terrifically done. So, Warren,
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad. That means a lot. I'm glad that it worked for you.
Well, how you pieces this film together. I mean, it was astonishing, and it was thrilling all the way to the end. Warren, thank you very much for carrying this conversation with us. I can't wait to see what you do. I mean, the man in the white van could come back for all I know.
Well, it's certainly we certainly have the potential for a sequel up our sleeve, so that's definitely there. Thank you so much, Gig, for having me and chatting. And are you going to be in Newport for the premiere?
I am not sorry. I
Okay.
no, not, but you enjoy Newport. It is a beautiful beach town, and I've been at the Newport Film Festival before, so it is a terrific film festival.
Oh, cool. I'm looking forward to it. So I'll have a drink in your honor, Gig.
Hey, thank you very much. Next time, Warren. Thank you.
Thank you.